Good evening. Welcome to our District 5 Candidate Forum. Bear with me with the PA system. If it gets kind of wonky, we may just kind of go the old-fashioned way and shout out a little bit. My name is David Paulsen. I'm the board president of the Tosa East Towne Neighborhood Association. And on behalf of our board and our members, I'd like to welcome you to our District 5 Candidate Forum. The Tosa East Towne Neighborhood Association is a nonpartisan community organization made up entirely of neighborhood residents, many of whom volunteer their time to make events like this possible. We also organize the neighborhood trick-or-treat, the spring egg hunt, which is this Saturday at Center Street Park, also Run Tosa Run, which will be May 19th this year, and many other wonderful events in the neighborhood. And anyone interested in getting involved in the Neighborhood Association is encouraged to attend our annual meeting, which is April 18th at Red Dot Restaurant. We are nonpartisan because, and I doubt this will surprise any of you, our members don't always agree on the issues, and that's fine. So our job is to provide information to help residents stay on top of issues that matter to them. And on a personal note, I work as a journalist, may bring some of that experience to this forum, but as a moderator, I'm acting merely as the TETNA board president and not taking sides. That also means I'm no expert on the local issues, but you are free to judge the candidates' expertise as much as you like. And with that, I'd like to thank the candidates, Brent, Nistler, and Heather Kuhl, for being with us tonight. Heather is a 41-year-old 62nd Street resident who's lived in the neighborhood for about 4 years. Correct me if I goof any of this information up, but she's been active in a number of causes locally, including Progressive Moms in Milwaukee, Tosa Equity Advocates, and Indivisible Tosa, and you can see her work all over the neighborhood in the Hate Has No Home Here sign that she distributes. She's also a mother of 3 children, including, full disclosure, one who's a classmate of my son here in Roosevelt. Welcome, Heather. And Brent is a 43-year-old Lefebvre Avenue resident who's lived in the neighborhood about 2 years and spent even longer as a business owner on North Avenue, where his law offices are located. Before going into private practice, he was an assistant district attorney, and when not practicing law, I admit I haven't caught his show, but he tells us he volunteers as a DJ at WMSE. He also has a daughter starting at Tosa East in the fall. Welcome, Brent. So a quick word about tonight's format. We don't see this as a debate as much as a chance for voters to hear directly from the candidates what they think about Wauwatosa, the issues that the city faces. We receive some questions in advance by email, social media, from residents, and I'll try to ask the candidates as many of those as I can. You can also write your own questions on the index cards, which are on the table in the back there, and Ryan, our vice president, will helpfully usher those up to the front, and we'll try to mix in some of those questions as well. We've asked the candidates to keep their responses brief, about 2 minutes each, but no gongs here or big hooks. While you're listening to the responses, please be respectful of the candidates and the people around you, and hold your applause to the end of the forum. And finally, we will have extra time after the forum for the candidates to speak with voters one-on-one if you have any additional questions. So, without further delay, let's hear from the candidates. We flipped a coin earlier tonight, and Heather will deliver a brief opening statement first. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I am overwhelmed by how many people are here. This is amazing, and this is why I'm running, because I love Wauwatosa. We moved here 4 years ago from Chicago. We didn't know anything about Milwaukee or Tosa, and just kind of landed here. We had, I think, one day really to look, and we saw 3 houses, and I said, I don't care which one we get, just get one in this neighborhood. And I love Tosa for all the same reasons that you all do. I love that our principal here today, after I left school and my son left his backpack, called me at home and offered to bring it to my house for me. I love that I know that my kids are going to have 1,000 eyes on them as they grow up and start making terrible choices. I feel like we have a really special, unique thing here. And I don't just want to protect what we have, I want to make sure that we keep it accessible, and we keep it green, and we keep it safe. And I think the way that we do that is by bringing different perspectives in. I think that this is not my job, and it won't be Brent's job, whoever wins. This is our job. I am not running so that I can tell you guys what is best for our neighborhood. I'm running so we can work together and figure out what we all want Wauwatosa to look like. Because at the end of the day, it's our money that goes into the general fund. And we have a right to be heard. And I think that's the one thing that through all the people that I've met with, either the people that run the city or those that live here, the one thing that I've learned that really struck me is that people are ready to be heard. They really feel a disconnect between our government on many levels, and they want to know that they listen to and respected, and I'm very excited to be able to be a part of all of this. So thank you so much, Dave, for putting this on, and Brent for coming, and you guys, because at the end of the day, your job doesn't stop after you vote. Your job is to hold whoever wins accountable and make sure that you stay involved and informed on the local issues. So, thank you.
Hi everybody. Thank you, TETNA. Dave, Kevin, and Ryan here from TETNA helped out, put these chairs up, and got this event going. Great turnout. It's great to see, but I'm not surprised because I know that people are really engaged this year, which is fantastic. And I think that you all know that too, and I'm really glad you're here, and I hope we can elucidate some of our positions tonight. I think Heather and I both really want the same thing. We want a vibrant, strong Tosa. We may be coming at it from different approaches, and that may evidence itself tonight. You know, I really do think we want the same thing, and I'm glad that you have a choice this year. I think it's really good. These aldermanic elections aren't contested very often, and it's heartening for me to see the neighborhood engaged and that there's a real choice. And so I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm running and why I think I'm a good choice for this position. I think I bring a unique perspective. I grew up in South St. Paul, Minnesota. My mom and dad are here actually from the Twin Cities today, so I appreciate them being here and supporting me. And anyway, I grew up there, and I moved on to UW-Madison in 1992 when I graduated high school. And freshman year, I met my wife Kim there, and she's here, of course, too. And I appreciate her support. And we got married in 1998 and had our daughter Claire, who's here, who will be starting in Tosa East this fall. I am an attorney. I have a law practice on North Avenue and 70th Street. I've been in that building for 5 years, but I've had my own practice I just had my 10-year anniversary of opening that practice. And Kim is our business manager. So we work together, and we live and work in the district. I think it gives me a unique perspective on what the folks want, what's worked, what hasn't worked over the past several years. I have lived on Lefevre for 2 years, but for the 14 or so years before that, I lived very close by. We were residents of Endurus Park on 68th and Locust for 12 years before that. And so I've seen East Tosa blossom over the last decade, and I really like what I've seen. I don't know if she's here, but Meg Miller was one of the key people involved in getting North Avenue going again. And that's when I first got into politics, because when I bought my place in 2013, I met her and tried to get a bid, a business improvement district on North Avenue, and that's when I really got energized. And I saw that when the neighborhood came together, we didn't quite make it, but we made an effort, and I saw that what an effort can do when you bring people together. And so I'm running because I want to bring the people of the neighborhood together to do great things here. Thank you.
All right, we're going to start off with a kind of a general question. This is from Erica, which we received in advance. She asked, what ways can city officials better connect citizens to their government, and how would you strengthen the feeling of community in our neighborhood? And we're going to alternate questions here, so we'll go to Brent then to respond to that, and then we'll come back to Heather.
All right, Erica, thank you for the question, and I think it's a great question. I think that in the age of social media, it can be used for bad or good. And one of the great things about social media for a local official is that we can keep folks updated on, really an up-to-the-hour basis on what we're doing in City Hall. I think that I've heard a number of complaints about the relationship between alders and constituents. I think it may be a little overstated. You hear from the people who are upset, not from the people that are happy. I do know, just in terms of statistics, there was a comprehensive study done by the city in 2016, and I'll post it to my website, but it's like 100 pages long or something like that, and there were over 500 surveys, and they asked about all kinds of different things. I think, I don't know, 30 different aspects of satisfaction of the citizens, and one of the aspects was communications between the officials and the citizens, and on the list of things people complained about or were happy about, it really was very low. So I think that overall, alders have done a good job. I do think I've actually seen firsthand in this campaign some poor communication from the alders, and I learned from that as how not to communicate. And I think that constituents deserve to be heard. I want to not only use social media, but I'm really hoping to have regular meetings with constituents. I think the face-to-face meetings are the most productive because people come to those meetings prepared. Anyone can throw something up on a website or shoot off an email, but if you're actually going to meet face-to-face with your alder, or the alder meet face-to-face with your constituent, you're going to go there with a purpose and be prepared and hope to resolve something or at least understand each other a little better. So I'm really hoping to have face-to-face meetings. I'd like to do that once a month, whether it's at a coffee shop or something like that. I'd like to set up regular meetings because I think that the communication really is key, and accessibility is really key. And so that's my thoughts on this subject.
Thanks. Same question then to Heather. What ways can the city officials better connect citizens to the government? How would you strengthen the feeling of community in our neighborhood?
Okay, first of all, you have to go to the city website and you have to sign up to get the emails. They will email you a million times, but you can pick what you want to hear, what you want to find out about, and you can read and find out what's going on. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you. They will email you the agenda for every single week. That's the best way to start. I think it's really important, not just online, but in real life, finding people that you want to talk to so you can get other perspectives on the issues that are affecting us. And I agree that face-to-face is the way to go because there's a level of respect that gets lost when you're dealing only through email, only through online, through forums and things like that. It's just so much easier to disregard people's humanity that way. And I've been meeting with people, literally my poor kids have been dragged all over the city, having people over to my house for tea, going to coffee with people, grabbing beers with people. I've met some amazing people, grabbing a couple of pints after work. And that's really, you just have to show up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Stay on top of the issues because you can't expect somebody to keep informing you. And then you know what's going on. You can come and ask your questions and feel empowered that you know what's going on. I think everybody should show up. If there's something going on that you're concerned about, show up at the council meeting. An email is great, a phone call is great, but when just watching the power of all of these bodies where people are spilling into a second room to watch it on TV, there's no denying that. And that's really how you move your alders to make decisions based on what you want is by showing up.
Thank you, Heather. Our next question comes from Jamie. This is Jamie C. Question is, what specific steps will you take to attract minority-owned and women-owned businesses to Wauwatosa? And so we'll go back to Heather for this question.
Well, I think that we need to start looking at finding grants with nonprofits like the WWBIC. I know that rent is really high on North Avenue. I also know that the bid, while I think it's awesome, you cannot deny what bringing all that business has done for us socially, what it's done for our property values, what it's done for the crime level. The more people that are walking through our neighborhood, the less crime there's going to be. But I do know after talking to some small business owners that they couldn't afford to stay on North Avenue because the way the bid was structured was that it was going to affect people based on their square footage of space, not on their revenue. So you could have a business that was a smaller square footage but high revenue paying less than someone who had a large square footage and smaller revenue, and they just couldn't afford it. So I think we need to start looking at more creative ways to bring women and minority businesses, like I said, working with the WWBIC. I also think we need to be really active in bringing people of color, of bringing more women into roles of leadership in our city. I think when I look at the council, I see a lot of white faces, I see a lot of men, and no offense, we need men, we need white people, but we also need other people to speak their truth and their reality for us so that we know how to serve them together.
Thank you. Same question for Brent. What specific steps will you take to attract minority-owned and women-owned businesses to Wauwatosa?
Sure. So I just want to clarify something. The 2013 bid failed, so there is no bid. So there is no extra tax on the owners. But I do feel, I'm still supportive of the bid because I do feel that if the bid were passed, we would have a pool of money to do just that, to attract and recruit women and minority businesses. And I think that was one of the things that the aim of the bid was in 2013. And because it failed, we don't have any specific program to do that. Beyond that, I still support the bid. I think it would be a good way to get women and minority businesses. I'd also like to, Wauwatosa actually employs about the equivalent of 450 full-time people. And in preparing for tonight, I tried to find out what the demographics of those employees are and how does that match the city. And I was disappointed that that information, maybe I'm a bad researcher, but that information was not readily accessible.
Yes, it is.
And I do think that if there was more of a effort to recruit people from disadvantaged communities, we could do better in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Just a reminder, please hold your comments till the end. We'll have a chance to talk to the candidates one-on-one after the forum. We have a few questions about crime. It's always a topic in the neighborhood. But Megan asks, is there a crime problem in East Tosa? And if so, what can you, the city, and the police do to address it? We'll go back to Brent.
Sure. It's a question of relativity. I mean, every community has some level of crime. And the concern I've got specifically for the 5th District is that in last year, calls to the police spiked in the 5th District, about 26% higher than the year before, from 2017 to 2016. And we all know from living here anecdotally that there were a lot of carjackings and some violent crime and some people were hurt. And that level of crime to me is unacceptable. And if you're wondering if it's just a matter of people making extra calls to the police, being more vigilant, the reason I don't think so is they went district by district. There are 8 districts. District 6 was flat. It was like a 0.34% increase, basically no increase. All the other 6 districts were down for police calls. So I think citywide crime isn't getting worse. We had a spike in 2017, and whether it's an aberration or whether it's a trend, we won't know until we have more data. But I want to say I'm very grateful to have the endorsement of the Wauwatosa Police Union, along with the Deputy Sheriff's Union and the Retired Deputy Sheriff's Union, and along with District Attorney John Chisholm, whose office I used to work at. And I think the reason I'm getting that endorsement, at least what the endorsement said when they were sent to me, was that they think that I understand the issue and the concern for public safety, and it's more than just telling people not to leave their cars running. We need to be proactive. The police force is actually down over the past couple of years. It was 92, now it's 88. The needs are growing in places, particularly like Meijer grocery store is sapping the resources of the police department and other big box stores like that for retail theft crimes. And in Wauwatosa, they don't stack the calls, so every call is just as important as the other if it's a non-emergency, non-in-progress call. So we need more resources. The police officers we need to attract and retain really good police officers too. And what I'm hearing from the police union is that the trend over the last 10 years is the Wauwatosa police are hiring people, and those people are using the Wauwatosa Police Department as a stepping stone to get a better paying job. And 10, 15 years ago, the police force was in the top third of pay for the state, and that has gone down to just average. So I'd like to see that get back up and set that as a budget priority. I'd also like to partner with the DA's office. One of the things that might be available is what's called a burn grant. It's a federal grant to get a prosecutor to focus just on issues in Wauwatosa. and work with the community and be a liaison between the DA's office, the police department, and the community. I think it could be really helpful, and we may be able to get that federally grant funded. So that's something that I'm going to work on if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Megan's question is the same question for Heather. Is there a crime problem? Is there a crime problem in East Tosa? And if so, what can you do, what the city do, what the police do to address it?
I am curious, the 92 number, because I looked in the 2018 budget, and I got the number 92 as how many police officers we currently have, so I was just curious.
I was told there was 88. That's
okay.
The information I had.
Okay.
So it's not dropping precipitously, but it's not rising.
Okay, because I saw in the budget for this year that we had 92, so I just wanted to clarify that. But I've met with the chief of police. I met with our SRO, Officer Tracy, who's amazing. I have talked to our liaison for the Neighborhood Watch, and all these people I've asked the same question to. Is crime really on the rise? And increasing sentencing, harsher penalties, what does that do in reality? And I know that burglaries between 2016 and 2017 are down 45% in our district. Theft is down 18%. Motor vehicle theft is actually up 23%. That's 3 extra car thefts. And I'm speaking as someone who had my precious mom jeans minivan stolen last summer. Unlocked, windows down, middle of the day. And to me, I think that the perception of crime is up. I feel pretty confident after talking to the chief of police and Officer Tracy and our neighborhood watch liaison that they agree with that. I do think that people are calling more, whether that's because they are actively engaging in neighborhood watch or because they are perceiving non-suspicious activity as being suspicious. I'm not sure. But I think that honestly, so many crimes, I'm from Chicago, so many crimes here are crimes of opportunity. And when we are looking out for each other's property and each other's bodies, we are keeping our eyes open and we care about our neighbors. We know if someone's walking up their driveway, we know to get their packages for them. When there were the carjackings, I'm 110 pounds, I have 3 kids. I backed my car into the driveway so I could see if people were gonna come down the driveway instead of being taken surprise. If we take away the opportunity, we're taking away so much of the crime that happens in Wauwatosa. I really do believe that. I don't at all want to minimize. Crime is serious and our safety is serious. I've never had a problem with the police not showing up in record. It's amazing how quickly they show up, and they actually drove me to pick up my stuff that got dropped off in the street after my van was stolen. But I fully believe that if we strengthen our neighborhood watches, if we are vigilant, they're going to keep walking. They're not going to want to stop here. So, and the idea of increasing sentencing really does increase the rate of recidivism. It really does hurt people of color more, and it really statistically, according to the Department of Justice, does not decrease crime. So I'm pretty firm about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you have any questions that come to you while you're listening to the forum, feel free to write them on the index cards on the table in the back. And one of our, Ryan, our vice president, will bring those up here. We are going to move to a question. There's been a lot of talk in the neighborhood recently about development, or is there too much development, not enough development, which kind of development? There have been a few kind of big projects that have caught headlines and the attention of our residents. But Bridget asks, in addition to referencing the log cabin development or property across Wauwatosa Avenue, and there was another question about the Pius building here. Bridget asked, what developments would you like to see in Wauwatosa? And again, she asked if you had any specific thoughts about the log cabin project, but in general the question is, what developments would you like to see in Wauwatosa?
Well, I honestly didn't know much about the log cabin property until I started getting involved in all of this. And driving through there, looking at the project plans and driving through that neighborhood and realizing how close that project would be to the neighbors, where Robbie would have no sunlight for 3 months out of the year. You just can't say yes to something like that. So I fully support our neighbors that have been standing up against that. I think that our representatives need to be hearing what they're saying. And at the end of the day, again, 70% of the general fund is our property tax dollars. So this one developer, and when they come in and they say, well, we're going to start at 15, because they know they can't have 15 stories. And then they bring it down, and then they bring it down, and they make it seem like they're compromising, when really they're just trying to bring it down to something that is palatable. Why don't we start with something that's palatable in the beginning, instead of playing this game? I don't think there's a real effort to work with the neighbors, specifically on that development. I don't think that Mr. Hoden has made very much effort to work with the neighbors in good faith and find a compromise. Generally, the apartments that are going up, the luxury apartments, it's not appropriate for our neighborhood. We are the city of homes. I would love to see affordable housing go up in Tosa, like truly affordable housing, not $3,000 a month, 2-bedroom apartments. I would like to know that the people that are aging out of their single-family homes have a place to stay in the neighborhoods that they've invested in. We need our older residents to maintain our history and the richness of where we live. I don't know. I think that the log cabin site would have been a great spot for a substation. I think that they could have incorporated it. I think that that having a substation there would naturally slow down traffic. You've got all the schools there. I think it would have been a really good idea. That can't happen now. Other than that, I would love to see more smaller row housing, things like that, so that people who can't necessarily afford the property taxes in Tosa can still send their kids to our schools.
Then for Brent, same question for Bridget. Which developments would you like to see in Wauwatosa? And she specifically asked for any comment on the log cabin property.
Sure. So in general, as a concept, development is good for Wauwatosa for a number of reasons. And again, in general, when we're talking about the concept. The reason it's good is because Madison has hamstrung cities across the state, including Wauwatosa, in terms of what they can do to raise revenue. And when there is development, particularly if it's not subsidized, that raises revenue. It allows us to continue our good number of services that we have, and people move to cities because of services, particularly the schools. So development in general is good, in my view. When you get into specifics, like a place like the log cabin, and I got really involved in that too. We saw each other at, I don't know, maybe 14 meetings, something like that. And I really learned a lot about how zoning works through that process. I think that the log cabin is a good lesson in how you can learn, how as an alder, you can look at a specific situation and say, you know, maybe there's an ordinance fix here. And I think the ordinance fix would be what really irked people about the log cabin was that it was zoned something called planned use development, PUD. And a PUD essentially is basically we're going to take the zoning restrictions off and we're going to fit them to your project. And that's what they did 30 years ago. They fit them to the project to make that an art gallery and to let that be there. And it had very specific requirements as part of that PUD. And one of them was that space, the structure would take up 40% of that space. And what Mr. Howden did is he came in and he said, I just want to amend this PUD. I don't want to start the process over again, because if you have a PUD, you've got all kinds of hoops you've got to jump through, appropriately so, and you've got to work with the neighborhood, and you've got to build a consensus before you start, before the shovel hits the dirt. And because he was able to essentially stand the ordinance on his head and say, well, I'm just moving to amend, he cut through a lot of red tape that was nowhere near could have been the intent of the ordinance, but technically it made that work for him, at least in the earlier stages. And so with respect to the log cabin, if you had an ordinance fix that said the PUD will be granted until the project is built, and then it'll sunset so that if somebody wants to come in and build a completely different project 3 decades later, they have to start the process over again. I think that would be more in line intent with what the ordinance was intended to do and avoid that loophole. The other thing about the substation, I've talked to people about that, and particularly Detective Molotsky at the Wauwatosa Police, and what he tells me is that the Wauwatosa Police are not looking for a substation because they're using the firehouse at Underwood right now. And they said the last thing we want is some line item that shows that the city's spending money on us for something we don't need. So I'm opposed to turning that into a substation. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. This is a sort of unrelated question. We received this tonight from Tiger in the audience here. And this gets at a question that comes up, has come up in other scenarios, and we hear it from TETNA quite a bit. As many of us are getting older, not me, I guess I'm getting older, but Tiger speaking from his experience, and there are older folks in the neighborhood who would like to stay in Tosa East Towne. And we need apartment building, Tiger says, and he asked, what should we do about that? And this is another question that came up about for folks who are getting older and may not be able to stay in the neighborhood based on the current housing. What do you propose to do that?
Sure, and this actually came up last night at the Common Council meeting because St. Camillus is trying to expand its facilities. And on that particular project, I'm for their expansion because they do so much good. They keep people here in Wauwatosa who want to stay here. They allow, this expansion would allow those people to turn over their homes to millennials and Gen Xers. And one of the other ways that I didn't mention you can actually raise revenue is if you buy an existing home and you rehab it, like you remodel the kitchen, for example, you remodel the bathroom, and then the assessor comes in and jacks up your assessment, that actually goes to the bottom line of revenue. So that is one way around the curbs that Madison has put in. So I'm in favor of that St. Camillus development expansion. I'm also in favor of senior housing in general. I haven't seen anything in particular in District 5, but if I was elected and something came to me on that, I'd definitely be interested in it. Again, I think some of these questions really have to do with, does the project fit the space? And there's all kinds of, you don't have to have a 51-unit apartment building to have senior housing. You could certainly put an 8-unit apartment building somewhere, and it could be geared towards senior living with a rec room and those kinds of things. And so I think when we're talking about apartments, everybody thinks about the first version of the log cabin. That's not necessarily every apartment that's going to be proposed in the next 4 years. So I am in favor of senior housing because it will keep people in Wauwatosa that want to stay here and just don't want the burden of home ownership anymore. It'll clear those houses out for new people to come in and improve those houses. I know from my door knocking that there are a lot of houses that need some TLC in the district. And when new people move into those houses, the first thing they do oftentimes is make those houses better. And so we do want to get more people here. We want to, City of Homes, we want to promote home ownership for this millennial generation. And one way to do that is to give the seniors a place to go who do want to move out, but want to stay in Wauwatosa.
Tiger's question, same question to you, Heather. As many residents in the neighborhood get older, what would you suggest that the city can do to help them stay in Tosa East Towne neighborhood?
Well, obviously, I agree. I think that, as I said earlier, we need to value our older generation. When I was volunteering at the skate rink a couple months ago, I met a guy, Fred Olson, who's very chatty and a lovely person. He rides his bike around here. And he was saying that he felt guilty keeping his house because he knew that he should be giving it to a younger family. They had to move. His wife was getting along and having a hard time with the stairs anyway, but he felt really sad that he was going to have to leave Tosa. And that shouldn't be the case. I think that we should look at, and not everybody has the money, especially as they get older, to spend 3 times what we're paying for our mortgage on our house, on an apartment. I think we need to look at real ways. If we're going to push all these apartment buildings, maybe we should work some inclusionary zoning in there so that we can make sure that we actually are not just using affordable housing as a talking point to say no to all development. We need to make sure that we want to keep our neighborhood diverse. We want to keep our what we have to offer open to people who, like I said, can't always afford the property taxes here. Not only do they benefit from our neighborhood benefits greatly from keeping diversity in it too. So I think I'd love to see inclusionary zoning in Tosa.
Thank you, Heather. We are going to do one more question on the topic of development. This is from Bobby, our current alderperson. Bobby says that Tosa has never had an unsuccessful TIF district. I know that the question of the TIF district has come up recently about developments that have been assisted by tax incremental financing from the city. You'll have to ask an alderperson about how that goes. We don't have time to get into the whole ins and outs of TIFs, but we'll ask the candidates here. How would you advocate the city use TIF districts to encourage development? Heather?
Well, that's an easy question. Not at all. So originally TIF was supposed to be for blighted areas, to take care of urban areas where you have the but-for test. Nothing would be developed here but for this money that the city is giving to help out. And it's supposed to be used for infrastructure and things like that. And I think that's a great idea. And California was where it started, and California has now outlawed it because it has gotten so out of control that the lines became very blurry between what qualified as blighted. And I've seen older people kind of scoffing at the idea of maintaining those guidelines for TIF usage. I'm not anti-TIF usage in any way, and I will totally admit that I am learning. This is a huge topic. It is so deep. So I'm talking to somebody who's been learning about this for 2 months. There's so much more for me to learn about this stuff. But I would say there's a place for it. I don't know of many places in Wauwatosa that pass this but-for test. I was looking at all of our open TIF districts, and I noticed, I want to say that the Burleigh Triangle is the one that I can say, okay, I could see that really nothing was going to happen here unless the city invested in it. But when I look at the State Street Station and what was the Chase building and all of that, and I was like, God, that's kind of terrible as it is, and then I found out that this TIF money was going into that. I was horrified. I just don't think that's an appropriate way when we're looking at these things not showing revenue until 2030, 2035. That's a long time. And buildings these days they're not built to maintain the same, they're not going to assess as high in 30 years. They're not built the way that our houses are built here. My house is almost 90 years old. I don't imagine a new structure is going to last quite that long, and what's going to happen to our money. You know, we're going to be adding strain on our police, we're going to be adding strain on our EMS, and yet we're not going to be putting extra money into our city services for that, and I think that makes me nervous. It's like writing a check we can't cash. So I just think we need to be more cautious about where we're spending that money.
Thank you, Heather. And Brent, same question from Bobby. He prefaced it by saying Tosa has never had an unsuccessful TIF district, I assume meaning one that has lost money for the city. But then he asked, how would you advocate the city use TIF districts to encourage development?
Well, I agree with Bobby, and I guess I disagree with Heather just in terms of the philosophical view of TIFs. If you look at the one that just closed, Mayfair Medical, it's a real success story. It was open for, it was going to be open for 10 years. They opened it for an 11th year. And with that 11th year, they raised $325,000 for affordable housing. So, you know, when you're talking about putting a priority on something like affordable housing, that's a way to do it in a win-win situation. The city made investments of about $1.8 million, and now they have property value of $14 million in excess of what they had. And I think there's some, I'm not referring to Heather, but I think there's some misconception among some people out there that I've talked to about TIFs. And I think some people think that TIFs are a tax break for everything. It's a tax break for the increase. And it's a tax holiday to basically, it's that but-for test. If this was a $100,000 property that would garner $2,000 in property taxes for the rest of the time that's up there, pay the $2,000 in property taxes while you're building and getting this business going, and then when the TIF closes, then you pay the higher rate. So long-term, when we're talking about the city of Wauwatosa, we're not talking about a family or something like that. You know, I hope, God willing, the city of Wauwatosa will be around for hundreds of years. And so you can look at these things in the long term, and I think the best way to address a TIF is a cost-benefit analysis. Now, having said that, I think you have to be cautious as to whether the but-for really exists, because there are certain people, you know, if somebody wants to put Starbucks on Mayfair and Blue Mound, and they give you the pitch that, well, I want to put this $1 million Starbucks up here, but I'm not going to do it unless you give me a TIF. Well, no, that's not true. The market will, if the market demands a Starbucks, then the folks at Starbucks can foot that bill. So I think you got to approach them with caution on the front end, but I think that if they can make money, and you are convinced as an alder that they wouldn't develop without the money, I mean, I think you have to give them a hard look. I think it's purely utilitarian. You have to look at it as a cost-benefit analysis.
Thanks, Brent. This next question came from someone in the audience tonight, Robin. She submitted the question, what do you believe an alderperson can do to address the social issues of racism in our community? And how would you do that? The question goes to Brent first.
Well, that's a good question. And I don't pretend to have an easy answer. I would want to hear from people about that. I've knocked on 800 doors during this campaign, and I've met a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. And you know, maybe I'm naive, but I think the people in our particular neighborhood are good people who don't harbor those types of feelings. But I know that institutionally, those problems persist. And in many ways, especially on a national level, they've gotten much worse. And so, I mean, one thing an alder can do is set a tone of respect. Another thing an alder can do is lead on the issue and call out something if they see it. I'm not sure what ordinance could be passed to address that. I'm not sure what program would help that to change people's hearts and minds. But, you know, people will listen to us when we talk if we get elected. And I think we need to lead on that through what we say and how we conduct ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Same question to Heather. What do you believe an alderperson can do to address the social issues of racism in our community? And how would you do that?
Well, I want to start with addressing the fact that our school system now has equity advocate coaches, which is amazing. And Michael Brock here, if you have not met him, he is so awesome. And anytime I am starting to feel overwhelmed with the world in general, I come here and I walk out feeling so much more positive about things. So I really do, I want to commend the schools for taking the lead on having hard conversations with our kids. I heard that we were going to have a town hall kind of forum for people of color, people of, I don't know, like I said, I heard wind a bit from the advocate coach, that we were going to actually let people of color come here and tell us what their experience is in Tosa. Because I can't tell you what a person of color experience is in Tosa. I'm not a person of color. I can tell you, you're right, we can't legislate that. We can't do that. We have to work ourselves to have hard conversations. We have to educate ourselves. We started a book called Tosa Equity Advocates, so we could discuss these hard things, because they're hard things to talk about. Our kids are listening to everything we say. They're following our lead. So like I said, or like Dave said, I started handing out the "Hate Has No Home Here" signs as a way to let people know, because I really do believe that Tosa is a great place. I don't believe that anyone harbors feelings about things like this, but I think that there is systemic racism, and I hate to say that talking about increasing sentencing for crimes is not going to do any favors for people of color in Tosa. I know that when you see somebody get pulled over on the street, chances are it's a person of color on Center Street. I live right in 62nd and Clark. Those are the people that are getting pulled over. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know what any alder or any one person can do, but I think that if we all make choices as individuals to educate and challenge ourselves so that we can start being the change we want to see in our communities, that's the first place to start.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you have any questions that you would like to ask in the forum, you can fill them out in the, put them on the index cards in the back that Ryan can give you, and bring them up. We are getting close to the hour mark, so we may be wrapping this up pretty soon, so we'll try to get through as many questions from you guys as possible, and afterwards the candidates will stick around and you can have some one-on-one conversations with them. Our next question was submitted tonight from the forum from Elizabeth. She asks, what do you think is the most important role of an alderperson?
I fully believe that an alderperson's role is to be the voice of the community. It is to take what's happening in City Hall, bring it to you guys, and have a discussion. And Brent's right, we need to have those face-to-face conversations. And then bring that voice. At the end of the day, an alderperson's vote, as far as I'm concerned, should count the same as all of your votes. So if the majority of people, and I don't buy this silent majority business, I think that the people that are showing up, the people that are taking the time to call and write and be active, that's who we're listening to. If people feel strongly about it, you have to speak up. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, sorry, I'm a little nervous. Get involved, be heard. My job is to hear you guys and bring your voices there.
Okay, thanks. Same question to Brent. What do you think is the most important role of an alderperson?
That's a great question. There's multifaceted roles, but what it really comes down to is the alder has to do the homework, have the judgment, and make the decisions that are in the best interest of the community as a whole. And it's a difficult job because you are weighing intensity of opinion, you're weighing the number of people involved on either side, and we've seen some very contentious issues. And an alder has a responsibility not just to listen to the loudest, most angry voice, but to weigh these decisions. And I think my experience for 4 years as an assistant DA gave me some compass to do that. And the reason I say that is I had to make a lot of very difficult decisions that were going to affect people's lives greatly. There were times where I had to recommend prison for someone whose kids were going to suffer because their dad was going to prison. And my heart went out to that family because I knew that I was really punishing those kids. But at the same time, in these violent crimes, if you didn't punish the offenders, you were sending a message that more people could offend. So you're weighing things. It's somewhat speculative by its very nature. But as an alder, you've got to have good judgment and you've got to make good decisions that are really the best for the community, not just today, not just through the next election, but through the next 10 and 20 years. And I think that comes from, that's why you don't see alder people who are 20 years old, because you really just need a lot of life experience. And I think what I have is the added benefit of having been a public servant for 4 years and having had to make some really difficult decisions. It's like flexing a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets, but it's still very hard work.
Thank you, Brent. Our next question was submitted in advance by Nikki, and she asks, what accomplishments are you most proud of? Goes to Brent.
Well, my daughter's right here, and she wasn't that easy to make, so the fact that she was born is a big accomplishment. We got one kid, and we would have loved to have more, but we're really happy with the one we got. She's awesome. She's in 8th grade at St. Sebastian's. We're very involved in St. Sebastian. She's in forensics. I'm embarrassing the hell out of her right now, so I'm going to stop. I'm also proud of my wife and our marriage. We've been married for 19 years. I said we met freshman year in college, which I think demonstrates my level to commit to something long term. And hers as well, maybe even more so. And so, and like I said, my mom and dad are here, and I'm proud of the relationship I have with them. They came 300 miles. They're actually on their way back from Chicago because well, long story, but they're here, and I'm really glad that they're here, and it's been a great source of support. So I would say that I'm most proud of my familial relationships.
Heather, same question. What accomplishments are you most proud of?
Well, when my daughter was a baby, I was a single mom, and I was waiting tables. And I remember one day calling my mom and literally sobbing and saying, all I want in life is to be someone she can look up to. And I fast forward, I was thinking about this today, and I fast forward almost 9 years, and I can honestly say that the example that I set for my kids is the proudest thing that I have. I live my life by my values, I stand by them, I'm not afraid to show up. The last 2 years has been literally nothing but pushing myself out of every comfort zone. I'm actually an introvert. I really prefer to be home sewing all the time. And in the last 2 years, I've been addressing the Judiciary Committee to protect the rights of pregnant women in the Milwaukee County Jail, and I've been protesting things that are important to me, and I've been speaking at gun violence things, and I can look at my kids, and I went home after one speech I did, and my daughter is super high anxiety, she's crazy. And I just looked at my 9-year-old, and I said, I was so nervous. I could not even stand it, but I did it anyway. And she was so proud that I was able to do that. And I honestly feel just going from being that single mom who was waiting tables and kind of not knowing what I was going to be doing to being the mother of 3 in owning a home in a neighborhood like this, sitting in front of a bunch of people like you that are here to, you guys want to hear what I have to say. That's pretty stinking amazing. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So another question submitted tonight from Nancy. North Avenue, including businesses, is not accessible to people with disabilities. There's almost no disabled parking on North Avenue. What would you do to change that?
Trying to cross North Avenue with a kid strapped on your chest and a stroller and another one that's running into the intersection, it's a nightmare. My daughter was almost hit the first day after first grade a couple years ago in a crosswalk leaving Indulgence. And we really need to do something about the speed of traffic that is on North Avenue. We need to do something. I struggle with parking because I do believe that the majority of us that live close, we should be walking. Though I also have 3 kids that can jump on the couch all day, and the second you go for a walk around the block, so I drive the cranky house too. I think we need signs in every crosswalk that say pedestrian crossing. I think those flags are cute, but they don't do anything. I'm terrified to cross the street. I don't know. I would love to hear more people's opinions on that. I'm not an engineer. I know that we need to widen the sidewalks. We need to level them out. They're terrible. I can't imagine trying to finagle a wheelchair on the sidewalks as bumpy as they are. But yeah, I'm not an expert at everything, but I would love to get some input on that to beef up what I know.
Thank you. Same question to Brent. North Avenue, including businesses, is not accessible to people with disabilities. There's almost no disabled parking on North Avenue. What would you do to change that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm on North Avenue every day, yeah, trying to cross the street is even if you're a sprinter, it's very difficult. And I know that the city studied the 2011 North Avenue came up. There was a North Avenue plan. And the intent of the plan was to add 2 additional lights, one at 64th and one at 72nd. And the engineers got a hold of it and ran it through the computer models and determined that it wasn't going to work very well. But that still doesn't really address the issue of disabilities. I think we need to make it a priority. We've got an aging population. I'm really hopeful that these businesses on North Avenue are going to continue and even more so cater to senior citizens, and that would include disabled people slow down a little bit. And so I think we got to make it a priority. It's good for business. And if it's good for business, it's good for the businesses, it's good for revenue, it's good for the city, and so it would be money well spent to invest in some safeguards. I would like to see more, people people sometimes follow them, sometimes don't. I jog and I go across Wauwatosa Avenue on Wright Street and I hit that button and I almost always get hit by a car and I say something I shouldn't say. But people, I'd like to see more enforcement of the traffic laws, and I'd like to see, this doesn't directly answer your question, but in the short term, I think one thing we could do right away is we could get more of a police presence during the rush hours just to enforce traffic laws, because that's one of those things where, unlike higher prison sentences, if you start handing out tickets, it's going to have a very good deterrent effect. If people are getting tickets and telling their neighbor, I got a ticket, I was going 3 over and I still got a ticket, I mean, if we do a little bit of that, it's going to go a long way. And I think that will make the street safer for disabled people. We come up with a better plan, because I really do think that it's good for business to make it more accessible. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions before we wrap up the first half of the forum. So this question back to Brent from Jillian that we received in advance. Are there ways to make Center Street Park more of a community base? She mentioned potentially baseball, soccer fields, potentially stadium lights. Any thoughts on Center Street Park, Brent?
Yeah, it's great. One of the privileges I've had over the last couple of years is meeting, they call themselves the Hosers, and these guys are really committed. They're the ones that do the rink, and the rink's been around now for a few years. It's been around before, and it came back, and I'd like to see more things like that. One thing that we don't have in East Tosa that I'd really like to see is a tennis court. We have to go to Enders Park or Hart Park for that, and I think that'd be something that'd be great for the neighborhood. It's good for kids, get kids out there and moving around. And so that's one of those things where, I'm all ears. I think in East Tosa, we have done a lot for the city as a whole with our development. And I really think it's time that the greater city recognize that and give us something back. And whether that's more park space or improved parks, I think that's something that feisty alder could advocate for, and I will certainly make a run at that if elected. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Heather, are there ways to make Center Street Park more of a community base in any way?
Well, I live right by Center Street, and we're there all the time. The events that they have there are amazing. It's such a hub. The addition of the summer music is fantastic. As far as adding, I think adding like stadium seats would be great. I don't know if I would want to have lights out at night, but I know that they were trying to do some work there, and it all came down to funding. They just didn't. The Friends of Center Street Park have been working to improve the park, and they just didn't have the money. So I think, like Brent said, it's just we've got to have a talk about it. We've got to see what people really want to do, and then start putting that into motion and bringing it to the council.
Okay. Do one more question before closing statements. And this comes from our other current alderperson, Joel. And he asked this question, suggested it from a questionnaire that is asked of council people when they're looking to fill open seats. So he asked, we asked you, what do you love about your neighborhood, and what are your favorite places in Wauwatosa to spend time? So we'll start with that.
We recently had to put a new fence in our backyard. And so we have such phenomenal neighbors that we actually put a gate so we can just go back and forth. When I take my kids around the block, we put a couple beers in the wagon and we walk around, and it takes us a solid hour and a half to walk around and stop and chat with all of the people that we know just in a 1 block radius. We don't go out much because we have 3 kids and their animals, and it's just easier not to. But honestly, my favorite thing to do in Tosa is to hang out with the people that live in our 1 or 2 block vicinity. We have rotating dinner parties, and we have barbecues in the summer, and we make it a point, even in the wintertime, to stay in touch together because you hibernate and your kids grow so fast, you don't even know. And that's what I love to do most, is just hang out in our neighborhood and go walking around and saying hi to our friends.
And Brent, same question. What do you love about your neighborhood, and what are your favorite places in Wauwatosa to spend time?
Sure. So I live on Lefebvre and Wright, very close to here. And I love the North Avenue haunts, whether it's Cranky Al's or Rocket Baby, North Avenue Grill. We're about 20 paces away, maybe 50 paces away from that. I belong to Snap Fitness, which is great. I just feel like it's such a unique district in that we have the best schools and all the advantages of being in a suburban area in terms of not too much density, but we have, at the same time, we have so many great options. I walk to work every day. I'd leave my car, I'd leave my Jetta at the office. If I need it, I'd go walk and get it. And I love the walkability of the neighborhood. Beyond our district, I love Hart Park. I love the music at Hart Park. I saw the motels there last summer, which is, if you're 40-something like me, it's amazing that a band like that would come play a free concert in Wauwatosa at Hart Park. So just wonderful activities in Wauwatosa, great neighbors, and I think that answers the question.
Thank you both, and we're going to move on to some closing statements. Since we started off with Heather, we'll start off with Brent. If you want to give a few minutes to wrap up, give a message to the folks gathered here.
Sure. Well, thank you again so much for coming, and thank you, Heather. And I just want to say, wouldn't it be great if national elections were as good as this, with this many people engaged and the candidates respecting each other like this? It's something that we're setting the example, and another thing I'm proud of is I'm proud of how we've run these campaigns. I have learned so much in the last 3 months, just knocking on doors. I did 6 or 7 weekends in the snow, and looked a little crazy. I had a Badgers hat on, and anyway, people probably thought I was coming to shovel their snow for $5 or something like that. But they were very nice, and I heard from everybody, by and large, people really like it here. And I've seen, as I said, I lived just outside the district for the last 15 years, and then inside the district for 2 years. And I've seen the successes here, and I want to continue them. And I really feel like this is a job that carries a lot of responsibility. I feel like in my adult life, I've demonstrated that I can take that on, that I can commit to it, that I have the skill set that will help me be a good negotiator, a good advocate, assimilate the material, and there's a lot to learn. I ask for your vote because I think that, again, I think I can do a good job. I know I can promise that I'll be committed to it, that I'll keep the lines of communication open, and I really thank you for considering me for this job.
And Heather, can you give a couple minutes closing statement to the crowd here.
And thank you all for coming. This entire process has been so amazing and so informative and fun, and just, it's something that has changed me forever. And I know that whether I win this election or lose this election, there's so much work that can be done, and there's so many people that are ready to pick up and do that work. So really, either way, I'm so excited to have been a part of this. I think that it is time for fresh perspective. I think it is time that we start opening up the table a little bit. I think that we need to hear some new voices, and I would love to be that voice for our district.
A reminder that the election date is April 3rd, and our district votes over at, I think all of our parts of the district vote at the library, Firefly Room. So get out and vote, and if we can get all of the people here to come to our annual meeting for TETNA at April 18th, that would be wonderful too. But let's give one more round of applause for our wonderful team.